Hi, I would like to thank you for joining me for this discussion of Isaiah chapter 2. It's a continuation of our previous studies of the book of Isaiah, starting at chapter 1. I'm looking forward to this discussion with you. We're not going to cover the entire chapter today, which is 22 verses. We're only going to do the first 4 verses. The reason why is because in this chapter there is such a wealth of information as I was going over it this morning. Oh my gosh, there was so much um, that was just blessing me, and I wanted to make sure that I shared this with you and not rush through it trying to finish a chapter. So we're definitely going to do just the first 4 chapters today. And I want to start off by reading Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4 first, and then we'll go back and discuss it. So, Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. I'm actually going to be reading this from the New International Version. I invite you to read it from whatever translation that you enjoy. Uh, and again, let's consider this. This study is not to take the place of your personal studies. My hope is that things that are shared in this study will enhance your own personal studies so that you can glean even more as you sit before the Lord with your word. So, Isaiah chapter 2, starting at verse 1, it says, "This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths.' The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." That is so awesome. If you don't mind, I want to read that last verse again, verse number 4. It says, "He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." That considering the times that we're living in and the unrest that is happening today, that is so pertinent. But let's go back and start with verse number 1 and consider again just these 4 verses. So, if you had, in case you did not have a chance to look at the uh, first videos that were done and shared in reference to Isaiah chapter 1, um, uh, let me share this with you in reference to Judah, because it opens up by saying, "This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem." So in the discussion of the first chapter, one of the things that I mentioned about Judah is that whenever you read in the prophets about Judah, you are reading um, and applying it to today. You are reading not just about the tribe that's over in Israel, but you're reading about these mantles and all of those that are affected by these mantles of God's people. Because when you're speaking about Judah directly, you're talking about God's people, but you're talking about specific ones. So Judah references the kingship and the priesthood. Um, Again, all of that is described in detail with scriptural references in the first videos that were done. The introduction, I think, to Isaiah, I think it will be there. Um, Judah, a blessing that his father gave him, and it's found in the book of Genesis, is that the kingship would not depart from him until the one to whom it rightfully belonged came, and that was Jesus. So that's the kingship, that's government, that's authority. Uh, and then reading further in God's word in the book of Samuel, First Samuel, you'll see a transfer of a mantle. And this mantle was the priesthood mantle. It was lost by the tribe of Levi and transferred over to the tribe of Judah so that he held both mantles, not just the kingship, not just government, but also the priesthood. And so today, like when you hear it said that government and religion, or politics and religion, doesn't mix, that's not necessarily true. In reading God's word, you will see the mixture of both of them. As a matter of fact, the reason that this was so important in reference to Judah is because Jesus, who came through the line of Judah, he is said to be both king and priest. We refer to him as king and priest. And so if those two mantles or those two offices were not supposed to mix, they wouldn't be mixed for Jesus. See, we got to remember that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, and the life. And so, because of that, he would not do or contradict his own word. So, we were the ones who, or man was the ones who began saying that government and politics don't mix. And one of the things that we used to promote that was the fact that Levi held the priesthood, whereas Judah held the government. But what was hidden was First Samuel. And in those first chapters of First Samuel, you'll see, when you have the chance to read over it, you'll see what happened to cause the Levites to lose that mantle of priesthood and for it to be carried by an Ephraimite, and how powerful and special that is. I described all that and why it was that Ephraim, or Samuel, who was an Ephraimite, was able to transfer or be that bridge that transferred the priesthood over to Judah so that he held both mantles. So whenever you read again in the prophets, whenever you read and it says Judah, know that you are, what you're looking at is a prophecy that was not just, see, God's word is a two-edged sword, it's a double-edged sword. And so this prophecy that was spoken to Judah, or to the tribe of Judah, it wasn't just to the tribe of Judah. You're looking at, for us today, to understand God's word and to be able to apply God's word, when we read of anything that was spoken to Judah, we got to keep in mind that we're looking at the government and the priesthood. So anything that is said, God is directing his attention to the government. And remember in Romans chapter 13, it's verse 1 and 2, where God says that all superior authorities are placed in their positions by God. So even when we think of government and we think of rulership, because we think of them as being superior authorities, they're placed in their position by God. So when we look at them, and when we look at, of course, we recognize priests as being in their position by God. So when we look at the two of them together, um, um, that's Judah. That's Judah. That's what's represented whenever we read anything about Judah. Now, also, it started off in verse 1, it said Judah and Jerusalem. Now, if you remember, I said that Jesus held both mantles. He's both king and priest. And in the book of Hebrews, it says, in the order of Melchizedek. Well, Melchizedek was a king. He was the king of Salem, and he was a high priest of the Most High God. And we see him in the book of Genesis when Abraham, after defeating all of those kings that had captured his nephew, along with kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and other people, um, this king of Salem came out to meet Abraham, and Abraham paid this king of Salem a tenth of everything that was captured. And so that was the first time that you see the tithe being paid. It was paid to Melchizedek, king of Salem. Now that's important because Jerusalem, that was later acquired by the Israelites. It's part of that land, the territory that they took from the Canaanites. Um, that was the area that Melchizedek was originally this king of, the king of Salem. So Jerusalem, Salem means peace. Jerusalem is also mentioned here in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1. He said, "This is what the son of Amos saw concerning Judah, concerning the government and the priesthood, and concerning Jerusalem." Jerusalem was the center of worship. When you read about that area or that place in the Old Testament, that was where David wanted to build this elaborate place of worship, this elaborate house of God. David wasn't allowed to do it, but his son Solomon was. And so the temple of the Most High God was there in Jerusalem. And even down to this day, whenever they have their festivals, that's where they would go. They would all go to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem represents the center of worship. It represents the place of worship, the place of worship, the place of worship. So whenever you see, now again, this is for your personal studies. This is for your personal studies to enhance your personal studies. Whenever you read of Judah, you're reading of the government and the priesthood. Whenever you read of Jerusalem, you're reading of the place of worship. And this is um, again, we're not, when I say the government, also, I'm not talking about all governments, I'm talking about God's government, because the Israelites are the people that God had chose out of all of the nations. And out of all those nations, Judah, the tribe of Judah, were the Jews. The tribe of Judah was the ones who held both mantles, the mantle for kingship and the mantle for the priesthood. And they held that for Jesus so that when he came, to whom everything rightfully belonged, he would get these titles, or he would have these mantles on him. So this is what Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah, the government and the priesthood, and Jerusalem, the place, the center of worship, the place of worship. Okay, so now consider this. Now make sure you're paying attention to this also, because in this time that we're living in right now, let me date this video. Today is uh, July the 5th, July the 6th. Let me see. I think today is the 6th. Today is July the 6th, 2020. At this time, because of um, COVID and coronavirus, or this plague that is going through, everyone had been asked to narrow their groups down to 10 or less. So for a lot of us during this time, and again, I'm dating this because once I upload this to YouTube and it's there, it's going to be there for a while. And so who knows when people are going to see this, it might be seen. Okay, so as I was saying, I dated this. Today is July the 6th, 2020, because many years from now, people will be looking at this video, those who will see it, and they will see how everything that is happening today is actually foretold in these verses. And this is Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. So, again, Isaiah saw a vision concerning Judah, remember, the government, as well as the religious leaders, and Jerusalem, which was the center of worship or the place of worship. Um, oh, and the reason that I was mentioning that is because uh, today, with everything that is going on, we don't meet as we used to meet. It used to be that we would get up and just freely go to church, either our church services or visit a service. And today we just can't do that with the COVID, coronavirus going through. It has caused a lot of people to, some people are still meeting, but for the most of us, it has caused us to shelter in place, which means that instead of meeting at Jerusalem, or instead of meeting in the place of worship, We have been meeting using various online uh, media such as Zoom, Facebook Live. Some people have been doing um, Periscope, I think it's called. There are a lot of different platforms that people have used to keep in contact with one another, even though we have not been able to freely meet and worship as before. So it says, this is what Isaiah, again, verse 1, because and I'm going over this, and I will be with each of these verses going over it over and over just to make sure that this is really set and that we're understanding that Isaiah saw this and he was talking about our day. So it was a vision that he saw concerning Jerusalem, concerning Judah, which represents the government, the mantles. Judah had the mantle of government and priesthood. So he saw a vision concerning government, the priesthood, as well as the place of worship, Jerusalem. All of this is affected, and we're seeing today like there's a lot like in addition to COVID, and COVID having shuts down our ability to freely go and worship because of this disease or this plague and how it's spreading. But also, what has been happening, what actually briefly tell the story without going into detail, and everybody will be able to go online and look this up. But recently, where everybody was at first sheltering in place with no problems, there were some things that happened in the news in regards to an abuse of authority and abuse of power. And in the government or in the justice system, the Justice Department, which means the police, um, there was a young man that was killed. And he was killed, and then it was so graphic, like it happened online. People were able to see it online when he died. Um, and the gravity of it, this young man's name was George Floyd. I don't know his age. But all of that information can be found online. The details behind that. This video is not about that, so I would encourage anybody who wanted to know the details who are not. And again, I'm doing this video with the mindset that it will mostly be viewed years from now. So, like for today, anybody that views this video today, everybody already knows. You know, we're living it right now. So, pretty much everybody already knows what happened, why it happened, and the reaction and the response to it. For those who are not or had not lived through this point in time, for whenever this video is watched, you can actually go on and Google it. His name is George Floyd. He died in a grievous way. I say grievous because it shocked and upset everything. Um, and the reason why I say everything is because I mean, even in other nations, what has happened? It was such a gross disrespect of uh, authority and abuse of authority and abuse of power and just a lot of stuff has happened because of that. And one of the things that happened with us being on this shut in because of the coronavirus, a lot of people came out and it was like, forget coronavirus right now. This right now needs to be addressed. And so, because of that, because of at that point in anger and at that point in hurt of heart, in there's a lot of people that came out to protest this, but in coming out and in coming together, what happened was a lot of people didn't have masks on, and a lot of people, because ain't nobody thinking about that at that point in time. Everybody's angry about what happened, so nobody's really thinking about the mask, and nobody's really thinking about corona. But now more people have been infected, and it is being said that this plague is coming around again now, and it's affecting a younger group. Where at first it was said that the plague that when it first went through, that it was affecting older people, my age group and older people who had pre-existing conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, and any other pre-existing condition. But now this plague is rerouting and it's coming around and now it's affecting younger people or those who, um, and it's spreading so quickly now. And I guess I don't know if they're saying it's mutated. I try not to watch the news in all honesty because it is grievous. Like there's report after report after report after report that is really grievous during this time frame. So I try not to watch it. But with all these things happening, with all of these things happening, it is really um, setting the stage for what we're reading in God's word to come to pass. So in Isaiah, again, chapter 1, he had a vision, and he had a vision concerning the government and the priesthood, Judah, and concerning Jerusalem, or the place of worship. Um, and that's, again, that stands out to me because of where we are today and are not being able to freely meet. And even with those who are returning into the building to meet together as opposed to doing this way, which is a lot safer, a lot of them are uh, becoming infected with this corona. So he had this vision, chapter 2, in the last days. So now he tells his vision, and he says, in the last days. So he's talking about our time right now, in these days. Now, he lived a long time ago, but he was talking about the last days. So again, that's why, like, we could read Judah, we could read Jerusalem and think about them. But truth be told, when he says, begins to talk about the last days, that's why I emphasize government, religion, place of worship. In the last days, it says, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. The mountain of the Lord's temple. So, mountain represents government. Whenever you're reading in the uh, Old Testament and you're reading about mountain, mountain represents government. So he's talking about when he says the mountain of the Lord's temple, or the government of the Lord's temple. Now, remember, I said government and religion does mix. So here you're even seeing it. The mountain, the government of the Lord's temple. A temple is a place of worship, or is where we serve, we worship. So again, you're seeing religion and government. So it says the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established in the last days, and it will be established as chief among among the mountains. So there are other mountains, and if you look at today, 2020. You look at today, there are several governments. There's the government of the United States, um, and that government is broken up into different houses. Like you have your legislative or different branches. You have your legislative branch, and you have your executive branch, and you have your judicial branch. So these three different branches in this government, and that's just our government. Then you have um, other countries with their governments. So there's a lot of mountains, a lot of mountains. It says, but the mountain, or the government of God's temple, God's government will uh, be established as chief among the mountains, or God's government uh, is firmly established. It establishes chief. In other words, all these governments that we're looking at, these governments cannot, for real, uh, satisfy the needs of the people. No matter who, no matter how much they try, no matter how many leaders they put in position, and no matter how many times they kill one leader off and put another one in, or change leaders, or vote one leader out, and no matter how much they do that, they can never meet the needs of all the people. And so, what we really need is a government that is and highly established to oversee us all. See, and I'm about to show you this because I've been saying this from what God has shown me. I'm gonna use this piece of paper. I'm gonna use this. So let me draw this line. This do a dark pen. Okay, so this line represents Earth. Let's see. Let me write this on here. Matter of fact. Okay, so Earth, heaven. So we all are on Earth. No matter what we do, We cannot satisfy the needs of every individual on earth. We can't see everybody. We can't see everybody's needs. So if I'm right here, do some X's, X, X. Okay. So if I'm in this nation right here, where I'm at, I cannot see the needs that's going on over here of all the people over here. So like if the needs of the government that I'm under here try to work and look, we can't even take care of the needs of all the people here because you can't see everybody here. So what I'm trying to say is that um anything that any of these governments do down here on earth cannot meet the needs of everybody. It never will be able to. But God's government, which is in heaven, his holy mountain is chief over all because from his position, he can see everything. Let me show he can from God's position, he can see everything. And so, because he sees everything and everything plainly, nothing is hidden from him. Instead of us trying to do things this way, we really all need to be looking up to God. That's just something a little extra that I throw in. So the mountain, oh, that's kind of shaped like a mountain too. So the mountain, as a matter of fact, let me show this because I'm just seeing this now. So what I did was I drew these little lines this way to show these mountains here or each of these governments here. These governments on earth, they might do some things, a few things to help some people, but they really cannot meet the needs of everybody. And they're going to forever miss because this is imperfection down here. You know, all of us are imperfect. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all make mistakes. So because of that, we're gonna all miss at some point, um, miss in our relationships with one another, miss in our relationship with God, which is all we're fallen mankind. And so our best bet is not to look to each other, but to look up to God, to look to God who can't help us. So anyway, of all these mountains, the mountain of the Lord will be firmly established as the chief. And that's what I'm trying to display in this scripture here. So that's verse 2, and it says, and it will be raised above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Okay, so here's the deal. It says it will be raised above the hills. Now, a hill, me and my pictures, y'all. I'm like drawing my little pictures. So I'm imagining, um, which means I don't have proof of this yet, but I'm imagining the hills to be different organizations, and I'm imagining that because the mountains are governments, and the mountains being governments, hills are smaller than mountains, so hills will be different organizations. I um, now have to, because I've made that statement, I have to look to the Lord to confirm that for me. And until that is confirmed, again, until that part is confirmed, I invite you to do your research. Do your research. Not, I'm human, just like everybody else. I'm prone to making mistakes, just like everybody else. Definitely do your research. So it says, um, in the last days, which is our times that we're living in, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. The mountains of the Lord is chief among these mountains here. It says it will be raised above the hills, definitely above the hills, definitely above the hills. And all nations will stream to it. Now, this is what the reference note in my Bible says in reference to nations. It says, well, as a matter of fact, let me just read the whole reference note. And this note is for Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2 through 4. It says, as in Micah chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. Now, I have not read that. I have not researched Micah chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. I'm dealing with Isaiah. I should have, and I probably will go back and look at it later. But it says, a description of the millennial kingdom, That's what Micah chapter 4, verse 1 through 5 is. It says, God's government mountain will be established over all the kingdoms of this world. God's government or mountain will be established over all the kingdoms of this world. Gentiles, nations, and Jews, peoples, will do the will of God. Justice and peace will reign. That's what the note says. So it referenced the nations as being Gentiles and the Jews as being peoples. Again, this was written many, many years ago. Many, many, many years ago. And so today, um, I ask because there's so many different groups that want to isolate and separate themselves. And so they point fingers, and the Gentiles is them, and the Jews is us. And but here's the deal. When it speaks of the nations and it speaks of the people, um, this proxy for today would be God's people. God's people. And the nations will be everybody else, everybody who have not chosen to seek out the Lord or serve the Lord. Um, how do I explain that? How do I explain that? The only way that I could truly explain that is to go back to Exodus chapter. Thank you, Lord. Go back to Exodus chapter 19, verse 6. Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, which references the Israelites. And what they were supposed to be. The reason that they were chosen out of all of the um, people that was on the earth, and out of all of the nations that was on the earth, the tribes of people that was on the earth. Um, God chose the Israelites, but He chose them for a specific reason. And so here it is. It says. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, I'm reading at verse 3. I'm starting at verse 3, and I'm going to read down to verse 6. And this is Exodus chapter 19. It says, the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the house of Jacob. To the house of Jacob. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Where's my pen? Wow, I'm underlining this. I'm sorry, y'all, but this was not originally in my notes to read, but in doing this video, I was brought back to it. And so Moses went up to God. As a matter of fact, let me go to verse 1. Exodus chapter 19. In the third month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain. The Lord called to him from the mountain. That is important. This is important. And said, this is what you are to say to the house of Jacob. This is important. And what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourself have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. He's talking about those plagues, that the 10 plagues that was unleashed on Egypt. And he's saying to Israel, to the people, he said, you yourself have seen what I did to the Egyptians, to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you gotta listen to this, you gotta listen to this. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured people. Let me try to demonstrate this. Let me try to demonstrate this. I'm just going to use these. These are nations, and these are all ink pens, clearly. These are all nations. But out of all of the nations, or out of all of these ink pens, I'm going to choose this one to be green. I'm going to choose this one for a specific purpose. Now, all of these are ink pens, and I can use every last one of these ink pens. They all have a purpose and a service um, for which they were created, which was for me to write. But this green one, out of all of these ink pens, has a special purpose, and I'm going to use this green one to highlight certain things, highlight, to stand out, to emphasize, to highlight certain things. So I will use all of these. So I don't um, not care for, not love, not like the rest of these ink pens. I want the rest of these ink pens. I want to use the rest of these ink pens, but I want to use this one for a specific purpose. That's Israel and all the nations. The thing is, the problem is, as humans, we have so become accustomed to separating ourselves and thinking that, okay, we're better than, or God only loves us and don't love the rest of us, and that's not correct. That is not correct at all. So he's saying, he says, now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom, government kingdom of priests, priesthood. So we're seeing the two again. A kingdom, a government of priests. You will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So that was for the Israelites as a whole. But what happened was when uh, Moses went up to when the people met, they heard God's voice, they were afraid. They said, Moses, you go up and you hear from God, and then you come back and tell us what God said, because, yeah, that's a bit much for us. So, and I'm paraphrasing. Please read it. Exodus chapter 19. So Moses goes up, but he takes a long time. I mean, he is up and he's in the presence of the Lord, and the Lord is writing out himself, writing everything out on tablets of stone. And I mean, it's just an amazing time. And he's just pouring into Moses. And so then while they're doing that, um, the people began to say to Aaron, Moses' brother, look, we don't know what happened to Moses. We out here, we need you to go make a God, and so that we could say that this is who brought us out of Egypt. Because that you got to understand, it was 400 years that they spent in captivity. So their surroundings had gotten in them. And the surroundings was that the Egyptians worshipped a lot of false gods and a lot of idols. And thing was, Moses was reminding them, Moses through the Lord through Moses had already reminded the people, you seen what I did to Egypt. You know that I'm real. You know that I'm real. So for them to turn around and go and request that an idol be made was just really, yeah, not good. So anyway, when Moses came down and saw what they did, God wanted to destroy all of them and just start over with Moses himself. But Moses interceded for the people so that when he went down, so that God didn't do it. Now, a lot of people did die, but when Moses called out, whoever's for the Lord, come to me, the tribe of Levi ran to Moses. Everybody else, they was doing their thing, and so they got disciplined. A lot of people died. A lot of people died, but not everybody. But the Levites at that point, because they chose the Lord's side, because they chose God's side, the priesthood was then put on them, the Levites. Judah, the tribe of Judah, still held that kingship. That was something that his tribe didn't even go running out, but they still held that kingship. But the priesthood at this point in time was put on the Levites. So when the Levites later on ended up, when the Levites ended up sinning, I'm just gonna say it like that. First Samuel, you had to read it in First Samuel, the first few chapters, first 3, 4 chapters. That priesthood mantle was put on Judah to carry both of them until Jesus came. But the thing was, the whole tribe, the whole nation of Israel was supposed to serve as God's government, and their purpose was supposed to teach all of the other nations. That's what they were supposed to do, teach all the other nations. Um, that's what they were supposed to do. But because they sinned and because they began picking up the practices of the other nations, which they was not supposed to do, they ended up losing it. So it says, it will be raised above the hills, and I'm still believing that the hills will be all of the various organizations um, that fall under the government, but organizations. And it says all nations will stream to it. So all nations will now begin to stream to the mountain of God, or stream to God's government, God's organization. And in actuality, if you really pay attention and start listening, you will start noticing that a lot of people will begin calling themselves kingdom kids. And they will begin talking about God's government. So nations, people, so nations are beginning to stream. Now here's the other thing. And I noted that in my notes because like everything is starting to stand out to me now. So this here is being done through streaming. And this stream is internet recording. It's going to be uploaded to YouTube. By the time you're actually watching this, you'll be watching it from YouTube. Um, from YouTube, I'm going to post it onto Facebook. So, and then who knows where to go after that. So there are various media streams or media outlets that we will be able to um, watch this video from. It says the nations will stream to it. They will stream. And so when I consider today, and this is like, when y'all see my eyes, it's like brightening up, they're getting big and bright. The reason why is because with this COVID going on, the way that we're connecting, the way that we are doing our services is online. We are streaming, that we're using Zoom, we're using Facebook Live, we're using YouTube, we are streaming services. It says all nations will stream to. I'm about to read this again. I'm about to read it again because this is happening now. It says, Isaiah said, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. That's what we're streaming. So it says, many peoples will come and say. So now, remember when I read the notes, it spoke of peoples as being the Jews. Um, but today, like again, a lot of times people want to read this and they want to separate themselves out and thinking they wanted to be Jew as nationality in it, but Jews is talking about the people of God. Um, the people. I'm just going to leave it at that. The people of God. You beg to differ with me, that's fine. But what we're looking at again is not a nationality. We're not looking for that because we're trying to understand and apply this today. And here's the deal: if I'm supposed to apply God's word to me, and I'm supposed to understand it so that I can apply it to me, but I'm steady, instead of applying it to me, I'm steady trying to say they. then I'm not getting it. And I totally miss the blessings that God has for me. So when he talks about the Jews, he's talking about the people of God. Okay, so he said, or it says, the peoples will come and say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And like I said, when I first read that, oh my gosh, I was so excited. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. So I went to go do some research. Now I got my notebook here because I had to write everything down. So I did this research earlier. And uh, I was like, why is it that you called it the house of Jacob and not the house of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Or because like when it talks about God, a lot of times when he's talking to the Israelites, he's talking about, or even in the New Testament, you heard them talk of the God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But this specifically says the house of Jacob. I'm like, what? So I go and look it up, and I came across Genesis chapter 28. I'm going to take you there. Definitely got to see this. All of this, just beautiful. So, okay, so the first verses, which we're not going to cover, verses 1 through 9, Isaac was blessing Jacob. They were getting ready to send Jacob off to go and to go to his mother's brother, which is his uncle's house. And they were going to go to his uncle's house to get him a wife from there because he was older, you know. And then it was about that time, and what they didn't want. Well, first of all, two things was going on. Esau was mad at Jacob, like really, really mad because Jacob had stole his birthright and got the blessings from the birthright. He didn't steal the birthright. For real, for real. Esau sold the birthright to Jacob for some stew. And so now that he had the birthright and it was sold to him, uh, Jacob went in and got the blessing. And that was the part that he like stole, the blessing part of it, because he did it. So, okay, so Jacob had stolen the blessing that was attached to that birthright, and Esau was uh, uh, plotting to kill his brother. He was angry about that. Rebecca, their mom, found out and talked to her husband, their dad, Isaac, and asked that Jacob be sent away to, well, first of all, she wanted to keep him alive. For real, she wanted to keep him alive. Second of all, they wanted him sent away because she didn't want him to do like his brother did, which was marry from the Canaanites, which is Hamshire. These like the Israelites, Isaac, Jacob, Abraham, all of them are from the tribe of Shem. Shem's brother Ham had the Canaanite children, and that's the land, the territory that they were living in because God had promised that territory to Abraham. So the Canaanites was from Ham's lineage, and they were considered, back then, they were considered the nations. And the Israelites was considered, of course, the people of God. Anyway, so they had Isaac had in this chapter, Genesis chapter 28, the first 9 verses, Isaac had talked to Jacob and had told Jacob to not marry any of the Canaanites, and to go to his uncle on his mom's side, his uncle, um, and marry one of his daughters, which was Laban. So, uh, Jacob ended up leaving where they lived at, which was in Beersheba, and traveling up to Haran, which is where, and I have it here to show you. So here's a map. Let's see. Okay, so on the map, on this map, right here is where they all live. This is called Beersheba. And up here is where he was going to Haran from here to here. So he left and he began to travel and he passed. Jerusalem, let's see, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? So Beersheba is where he was. And he had got up to Jerusalem. He passed Jerusalem, but he did not quite make it to Shechem, which is there. That's Shechem. That's Jerusalem. In between Jerusalem and Shechem is a location which originally was called Luz, but the name of that location was changed, and it was changed to be called House of God, which is what Bethel means. Beth means house, Beth. Beth means house, El means God, Bethel. So we see that in Genesis chapter 28, it's verses 10 through 19. This is what it says. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. So in that distance that I showed you, that is like a day's distance. Um, so he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head like a pillow and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching in the heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Above at the top of this stairway, above it, it says, stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord. Now remember, this is a dream. He said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. All peoples on the earth, all, he said, all of the people, everybody on the earth will be blessed will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place. And I was not aware of it. Now, the reason he said that is because if you looked at the distance again that I showed from Beersheba to that location, he might have traveled that many a times. And so now he's saying that it's like now he has this revelation like, I'll be darned, the Lord is in this place. And I didn't even know. Like, I mean, because now he's getting ready to leave. He's getting ready to leave that area and go out to a whole nother area, like distance away. So now he's seeing where it was that he was actually living. So he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And so now that is important. He called it, where's my notes? Right here. He called it the gates of heaven. The gates of heaven. If you are writing notes, if you're writing any of this down, you're going to want to write that down. The gate of heaven. I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes. I'm going to finish this up. It says, verse 18, early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house. So he wasn't just talking about journey to go where he was going, but he was also, he wasn't just talking about the journey to go where he was going and his safe passage there, but he was also talking about his safe passage back, his return. He said, and the Lord and so that I return safely to my father's house. Then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. Now I mention that because uh, he made a promise to God, a vow to God at that moment. Because when he recognized where he was, and when it was communication that was happening, so he was at that point saying to God, um, if you bless me, if you watch over me, if you keep me, if you make sure I have everything that I need, my food to eat, clothes to wear, what more do we need? He was saying that if you keep me safe, you will be my God, and I will serve you. He said, um, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So that he was promising God a tenth, 10%, to give him 10%, a tenth. I mentioned that. I think I wrote that in my notes for a reason. A lot of times we go through the motions of giving tithes and offerings, and when we give tithes, we don't even give a tenth. We give like a portion of what we just take out a couple of dollars in here, that's my tithe, that's my offering, not realizing the gravity of what that tithe represents is giving back to God out of gratitude for everything that he gives to us, for the fact that he keeps us. He watches over us. He protects us. He provides for us. That tenth, giving back to him of everything that he gives to us. He's of everything that he gives to us, to give that tenth back to him is a way of saying thank you. And it's really a reasonable service. It's not a hardship, but a lot of times people don't give that tenth. They just give some of what, here, let me give you $5. And I might make $500. I'm gonna give you $5. I'm not even gonna give you a tenth. A tenth of $500 is $50. A tenth of $500 is $50. A tenth of $50 is $5. So you make $500 doing whatever of everything that you did. You make $500, and you give God $5. You're not even giving him a tenth. You're giving him 5 cents off of everything. You're giving him a fifth of whatever you make. Um, that's not really showing respect for the one who is supplying to you or giving to you. That's not even showing gratitude. That's just like, here, let me give this. Let me give you $1 off of that. $1 off of we ain't gonna even go into that. We're not gonna even go into that. So he called this place Bethel. And the significance of this place, this gate of heaven, was the fact that there was communication that was happening there. Again, when Jacob went to sleep, what he saw was a stairway, and he saw the angels um, ascending and descending, going up and down this ladder. And then he said, at the top of the ladder, at the very top of the ladder, he saw the Lord. So there was a communication that was happening, and the Lord was giving the angels information to send out, and they were taking, they were bringing down bringing down what he was saying, or point out what he was saying, and going back up, and it's just a constant communication, a constant flow. And so this place, Bethel, this house of God, what it actually represents is that communication between the Lord. It's not just about um, us speaking to the Lord, us praying, but it's about us receiving, us hearing, us getting a response, an answer. And what the Lord said was, he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father, Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west, the east, the north, and the south. All the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. So that's God's promise to never leave or forsake us. Now, this really stood out to me because for those who actually know my story, my backstory, um, I was in prison, or I went to jail in 2002. I was in jail for 3 years, 3.5 years, and spent the other 3.5 years in prison. When you go, now I don't know how it is for everybody in other states, but for the state that I was in, which was Illinois, when you go into jail, you could either be released from jail or you can be sent to serve out a time in prison. So for those who are charged and given a prison time, they go into this place, which is like a transition place. Um, I'm thinking it was Dwight. I'm not sure. I don't remember what the name of that transition place was. But the transition place that I went into, when you go into that transition place, what they do is they first check you in and then they isolate you. And the reason that they isolate you before letting you out into the community is because they got to do a lot of exams. They got to do like a health check. And then once you pass that health check, then they have to determine where you're going to go. Are you going to stay in that location? And that original location that they send you into is like the maximum location before they disseminate you out. And then when they disseminate you out of that location, you're either going into a medium facility or a low facility, and that has to do with the amount of freedom that you're able to get. So I went in. I went into the prison part of it. I went through the isolation part, and I was still in that isolation part. And just as I was beginning to pass it, like other people were coming in and like passing right out. For me, I passed it, and then I went into this area where I was assigned a job, and I still had to do like the fingerprinting and all of that. So they had called me, and I was on the job, and my job was in the kitchen, so I was like basically opening cans and stuff. I don't really ever remember going out to eat because I still was housed in the detention area. I was not yet sent out into general population. So at the job, I got called and I got sent to go do fingerprinting. So, and it was like a distance. Like I'm vaguely remembering everything because this happened so long ago. So this was like 2005, I believe, 2005. Um, we're in 2020, so it's like 15 years ago. So I went into this I had to leave from where I was working. It was like, I'm gonna say it was like over here, and I had to walk, and they had to tell me how to get to where I was going, and there was this path that I had to take. So I had to walk, and it was nothing but like open land, and it was like different houses, and because I'm new there, I really don't know everything. So I walked past like the bunk area where we were, and I had to take this path and walk all the way up down to this other end where this building was at, and then I had to go down into this room that was down in the basement, and that's where they were doing the fingerprint. So I went down there and took care of all of that. I was on my way back, and I was made to take note of everything. Like it was just open land. And in all honesty, even though it was jail, the open land, the grounds was beautiful. Um, the buildings, that's all you saw was buildings. So like I really didn't see anybody that was behind these buildings. I did not get a chance to see any of that. But for the land that I saw, it was really pretty. And I was very aware of where I was, that part also. So in walking back, I remember having this vision. I'm walking, literally walking back to the grounds. I had not yet been called to be assigned out, or I had not yet left that isolation part. I was actually doing the job, and I had only been on the job for maybe like a couple of days. Um, So I was walking back, and I never forget, I had this vision after I was being made to look at everything, and the Lord said to me, He said, "Are you ready to go home?" And I said, "Not if it means that I would not hear your voice. I cannot begin to explain to you how precious it is to be able to hear the voice of the Lord speaking to you, and especially speaking like to have these conversations, to talk to God and to hear him speaking back, and all of that began happening with me when I was in jail. This was prison part. And so he said to me, "Are you ready to go home?" I would never forget this. I said, "Not if it means that I would never hear your voice again." And he said to me, "I would never leave you nor forsake you." When I heard that, that was so precious to me. And then a thing came across the loudspeaker and I heard my name. And so when I got to the unit, it was like they called for me. So the officer said, "Yeah, you got to go, blah, blah, blah." So I left out to win. And what they did was they gave me my moving assignment. And I was leaving the very next day. I was just supposed to go and pack everything up because the very next day I was leaving and I was being shipped out of there. And I got sent to Lincoln Correctional Center, and that's where I served the remainder of my time. And there was so much that had happened with that, so much amazing um, uh, further training with the Lord. When I tell you the Lord, to have that experience of walking with the Lord and knowing that he was teaching me a lot of things and showing me a lot of things, and just, oh my gosh, it was trying and awesome at the same time. It was just amazing. It was a process that I had to go through, and it was a growth process that was along with it. But the thing was that, or the thing that really stands out to me is that conversation. And so Jacob experienced that in this place. And he said, where is it? "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." Hold on, let me, 1 second. Okay, so he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." I can honestly say I felt that same way when it came to being in jail, the things that I experienced. Um, with that experience for me, I got a chance to know just how real God is for real. And so my walk with Him, like who I am today, as in comparison to who I was before that experience, it's two different people. Today, I can tell you for real, that God is real. And I have so many experiences back to back to back to back to back to back to back, continuing down to right now to prove that God is real. That proves for me even more and more and more that God is real, including how God opens up his word so that I can understand it. Like, that is the most valuable thing that I have. The most, like, there's not a possession that I have that is more valuable than having God's word opened up to me so that I can understand it. And it is just a privilege, a great privilege of mine to be able to share that with you. And so that experience that I had helps me to understand this experience that Jacob had, where he had a vision. And he first of all, he's going out, he's stepping out on a journey, going somewhere he had never been, like a distance, a farther. He is going to see his uncle, his mama's brother, and their family, and he's going there for the sole purpose of making sure that he get his wife from there. No other purpose but to make sure that he get his wife from there and not from among the Canaanites. So he's taking this journey, stepping out on faith, and in that journey, he gets into this area that uh, it says he reached a certain place, stopped for the night because the sun is set. No other reason. Go and lay down, make himself a little area, lay down, put a rock under his head so that he could lay his head down and take a nap. And he has this vision of a stairway to heaven. And he sees angels going up and down. And could only imagine, like when he see all this, he's just like, even though his eyes is closed, his eyes is wide open and he's looking, like intently looking. And then the Lord speaks to him from there. And it's like in his heart, he just knows like, wow, wow. And so having had that vision, I can only imagine that along the journey with God speaking to him, that he don't want to lose that he realizes like God has spoken, and I've heard, and he's with me. And so the fact is, because Jesus said, he said, I will not leave you until I have done what I promised, which means the entire time that he's taking these steps and this walk, he is taking this step and God is with him. The Lord is with him. So he's continuing to talk to the Lord all along the way as he goes to Haran. But this place where it started, he marked that place and he said that this place, this place, this place, this place, this place. He said, if the Lord be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking and will give me food to eat, clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my Father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. This stone will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. I will give you a tenth. Of all that you give me, of all that you bless me with, I will give you a tenth. Praise God. So this here, so I don't want to miss this part because it's like so much that was interesting. Because remember in Isaiah, he talked about the house Bethel. So now here's what I want to share with you, and I don't want to miss. Like I share with you my personal experience and how I was able to really identify and understand what um, Jacob had experienced. So the other thing is this: he called it the gates of heaven, the gates of heaven. And so, in this place where the Lord spoke to him, he called it the gate of heaven. Now, I want you to see this. I'm going to go over to John chapter 10. I want you to see exactly who he spoke to. I want you to see who Jacob spoke to. John chapter 10. I'm going to start, let's see, it's verse 9. I have down here verse 1 through 18, but I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, I tell you the truth. Now, this stands out to me also. Oh my gosh, this video is getting long. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this long, but I got to share this with you. And that's why I only chose to do the first 4 verses of Isaiah. So here in John chapter 10, verse 1, it starts off by saying, I tell you the truth. Back around the beginning of this year, I had my fill of hearing things across a platform that just was not correct. Especially when I sit and I study God's word, and I'm like, wait a minute, but wait a minute, So when I start like examining God's word in relation to everything I hear, and I invite you to do the same thing. Don't just take what I say, really go look it up and examine it, and examine it from a clean place, from a pure heart. Ask the Lord to show you the truth, because that's who Jesus is. He is the truth. And so this here, like there came a time when I was searching for truth. I was tired of being lied to. All I wanted was truth. That's it. And the first thing I saw when I opened God's word was Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it's like, because remember I said I've already had that experience where I hear the Lord speaking to me. So that was my answer. So it was like everything I had chosen, that everything that I studied started with that. It started with the truth. So here, John chapter 10, verse 1. Now remember, it started with Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 2 took me over, and I think it was verse 3 or verse 2, 3, I think it was verse 3, took me over to Genesis chapter 28, where I was looking at Jacob with Bethel, right? With the where he had this experience where he heard the Lord speak to him, where his ears was like opening. He literally is now having these conversations, and so that now takes me to John chapter 10, verse 1, where Jesus says, I tell you the truth. Ready to hear from God? Okay, John chapter 10, verse 1. I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate. Now remember, Jacob, where he was at Bethel, he called it the gates of heaven. He called it the mountain of God. Did he say the mountain of God? Let me go back and look. I want to make sure because I don't want to mess this scripture up. I don't want to mess these verses up. Look again. He said, this is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. That was verse 17, 28, verse 17 of Genesis. So here Jesus is saying, red letter. Jesus is saying, the man who does, I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate. Gate. We're getting these gates, right? But climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The man who enters by the gate, is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him. Now check this out. I'm going to turn over to Ezekiel chapter 3. I'm excited. I'm excited. You guys, I am excited. This word is exciting to me. It is exciting to me. Okay, so this is Ezekiel chapter 3. This is verse number 17. This is what the Lord said to Ezekiel when he was commissioning him to be a prophet. He said, Son of man, this is verse 17. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me. Son of man, I'm going to read that again. I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me. That's Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 17. Going back over to John chapter 10, verse 3. The watchman opens the gate for him, the shepherd, and the sheep listens to his voice. Y'all, catch this. The watchman opens the gates for him, and the sheep listens to his voice. Catch this. Do it again. The watchman opens the gates for him, and the sheep listens to his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, and man, this is happening now. And when Jesus has brought out everyone that belongs to him, he knows who belongs to him. We don't. So it's not for us to judge those of us who are being called to speak his word, but those of us who are the people of God, who are saying, let me go back to Isaiah now. It says, many peoples will come and will say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, where there's this interaction where you can hear the Lord speaking to you. Come, come, so that you can hear God speaking to you. This watchman opens the gate, and the sheep listens to his voice. It's like, I get it. Like there's a light bulb clicking on. It's like, okay, I get it now. I'm beginning to understand. Oh, let me go study myself now, because now I'm beginning to understand. It says, he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. His sheep no longer follows the voice of these others. They follow the voice of the Lord because they know his voice. It says, but they would never follow the voice of a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they didn't understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth. I am the gate for the sheep. That gate that Jacob saw in that area that he called Bethel, meaning house of God, that gate that he saw, Jesus said, I am the gate. So now we know who was speaking to Jacob. He said, all who ever come before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. The hired hand, catch, the hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I'm going to have to come back to this much later and go over this. It says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock, one shepherd. Okay, so I'm glad that it mentioned that there. I am going to break that one down. I am going to explain that one. Jesus said, I have other sheep that are not of the sheep pen. He has the nations, my little example that I used before. He has the original sheep pen, or the peoples, the Jews, the people of God, and then he has the Gentiles, the other nations. He said, I have other sheep. He's talking to these initially. He says, I have other sheep who are not of this sheep pen, but I must bring them also. And there shall be one flock, one shepherd. Separating we be trying to do. I'm just saying. That's what Jesus said. He said, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. And there shall be one flock, one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So, In verses 7 and 9 of John chapter 10, he tells us that he is the gate. In verse 11 and 14, he tells us that he is the shepherd. So let's go back to Isaiah. That was to me, that was like really interesting. I wanted to share that. So Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. Many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. In other words, to God's organization, to God's government. We need God's government to rule, because man's government is just not working out. So we need God's government to step in and rule. So let us go up to God's government, to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. The house of the God of Jacob is that place where we can begin to hear from the Lord. There's one thing to sit and be told, thus says the Lord, God's word say this, say that, blah, 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 blah. And it's a whole nother thing to experience having the Lord speak to us himself. So not only are we're seeking out God's government and his rule, but we're also seeking to hear his voice. And that's what verse 3 is talking about, where he said, many will say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob. It says he will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his path. Check this out again about Jesus. This will be 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21. It says, to this you were called. Wait a minute. Matter of fact, you move it back up to verse 18. It says, slaves, submit yourself to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. Slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect. This refers to, when he says slaves, he's talking to anybody. He's not talking about slavery. He's talking to anybody that has somebody in a position of authority over them. He's telling that person, that employee, that wife, that child, he's saying, submit yourself to your master with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate. Not every master, not everybody who has that position of authority over somebody else is considerate. Not everyone who is has that position of authority over somebody else is good. He says, submit yourself to your master with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. He says, submit yourself to them. He's talking to the person that has somebody in authority over them. He says, submit, and that could be an employee. As an employee, if you have an employer that is over you, that is harsh, that is not considerate, kind, good, he's still telling us to submit. As a wife, if you have a husband that is over you, that is harsh, that is not considerate, kind, or good, he's still telling us as wives to submit. As a child, if you have a parent that is over you, that is harsh in dealing with you and speaking to you, that is not considerate, kind, or good, he is still telling you to submit. He says, slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because he is conscious of God. This is God's word. I'm about to read it again. This is 1 Peter chapter 2. And initially I was going to read verse 21, but I started at verse 18. Verse 19 says, for it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because he is conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his footsteps. It says, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. After it tells us to come and go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, it says, he will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his path. Okay, so it continues. It says, the law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So the law, so now remember, we're talking about a government, a government. So looking around us, the government that we live under has many, 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 many different laws. So here we're being told as we go up to the mountain of the Lord, which is God's government, and we go to the house of Jacob where we begin to hear God speaking to us, and we begin to have that interaction, that communication, that communion with the Lord. It says, and as the Lord begins to teach us his ways so that we can walk in his paths, we're told that the law will go out from Zion. Now, Zion is heavenly Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is a place of worship. It was the place where uh, all the Jews, where they would gather to have their convention. So it says the law will go out from Zion. Zion again represents heavenly Jerusalem. And the reason that it's heavenly Jerusalem is because everything that we see on the earth is a copy, a carbon copy, just like this shadow behind me. Everything that we see on the earth is a copy of what is real. It's an imitation of what is real. We see that in the book of Hebrews. So when we pray the Lord's Prayer and we say, Our Father, which art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy kingdom, we're talking about the mountain of the Lord, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So with the heaven having been cleaned up and Satan cast out of heaven, he's now down here on earth with us. And so when we pray that prayer, the Lord's Prayer, we're asking God to clean up the earth now as it is in heaven so that we can again be the copy of what's in heaven. Right now, I believe copying like we're supposed to. So it says, the law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, that place of worship, that place, the place of worship. The word of the Lord will go from there. Now y'all hear God. Y'all know when this is a true word of God. It says, he will judge. Now, at that point that is happening, at that point that this law now is coming down from Zion, and the word of the Lord is coming from Jerusalem, from that place of worship. It says, he will judge between the nations. Everything that's going on down here, see, we're all fighting one another, and we're not supposed to. We're all on the same plane. Everything is level, and we're fighting one another, and we're not supposed to. We have aught with one another. And so if you are a parent, let me use my little notepad again, put it up close. So this is earth down here. This is all of us down here, and we're all fighting one another. Now, if you are a parent and all these children are fighting one another, you're going to settle it. Verse number 4 says, he will judge between the nations. See, he sits high. Jesus sits high. We have deducted through looking at God's word that Jesus is that gate. He's the Lord who spoke to Jacob at the house of the God of Jacob. He's the one that was at the top of that ladder. He's going to judge. It says he will judge between the nations, and he will settle disputes for many people. Right now, looking at what's going on in our world today, and the argument we have, Black Lives Matter that's going on right now. Um, we have the fight against what is called white privilege. There is the fight against the abuse of authority, the abuse of power. There's just a lot of fighting. In addition to that, there's nations, other nations fighting against each other, and this is wrong and that is wrong, and just there's just a whole uproar down here on this earth. And all you got to do is turn on your news to see it, to see, or look at the newspaper. If you, like me, get the news to your phone. Matter of fact, let me do this. I'm about to show you. I get the news. I don't watch the news on TV too much, but if I really want to see it, I have an app right here. Oh, I don't know what I did. Okay, so I have an app at the top of my phone that is news. It has like a lot of apps in there, which is news. One is called Smart News, the other one is called News Break. So the news, and then the other one was like the weather. So the News Break, local news and beyond. The news break is like breaking stories, breaking headlines. So just there's a lot that's going on. Just just a lot in our world today, a whole lot. And it says that he would judge between the nations and settle disputes for many people. The reason why we're still disputing, or we will be disputing for a long time until Jesus steps in to settle it, is because we're all on the same equal plane. So no matter how much we try to fight, we would never be able to settle matters between one and another because we only see it from a limited view. We can see what's affecting us, but we can't see how what's affecting us is affecting the next person, and vice versa. And so we're arguing our point, but we're all arguing it from the same level plane. But it would take Jesus, who sits high, to look low and be able to see everything and settle matters. So it says he will settle matters for many people. And the result of it, it says they will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. I seen earlier today, I seen this one news report of this militia. It was a all black militia. I can't remember the name of the group. I think they call them NFAC. I think that's what they call themselves, NFAC. I don't remember. I don't remember. But and they clearly said that they were not Black Lives Matter, and they went and they did this peaceful protest in an area where usually the Ku Klux Klan, which is like a white militia group, I just call them that. That's me calling them that. I don't know if they would call themselves that. I don't know, but the the black militia group was escorted by the police. They were escorted by the police, and they were allowed to go in and do their protest as long as it was a peaceful, and it was a peaceful one. But like these different groups, the scripture here is saying in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4, it says he will judge between the nations. See, we need somebody to judge. It's because there's a lot, and we're arguing, two groups were arguing against one another, and our points are valid. Our points are valid, but we're not being heard. And so we're arguing with one another, and we need somebody who can step in and settle the matter. And that's what it says. It says he would judge, he would judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many people. Please read that. That is Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. It says, and they will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. It will have been settled. This was a vision that Isaiah had concerning our day, the last days. So again, that's the first four verses. This part has been an hour. I still have to go in and edit the other parts of the video that I did and had to stop with this. So This is going to be a pretty long video. For that, I apologize. But again, this is only the first four verses. And when God grants me to be able to come back with the remainder of it, or however God sends me, because one of the things I have learned is that in all of the ways, in everything that I do, and whatever I even include in whatever I bring to you, because it's in a matter, whatever the matter is, that I have to seek the Lord's guidance and I have to follow in His footsteps and let Him guide and direct. So if He allows me to come back, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to coming back to you again later with more. All right, bye.